game of Counter-Strike, the player has many possible strategies. They can buy a sniper rifle and wait for the enemy to come to them. They can buy an assault rifle and charge the front lines. Or they can just bust out their knife and try to stab somebody. But no matter what strategy you ultimately choose, if you take the time to stop and think and evaluate those strategic options, well then bang bang, you're dead. Games like Counter-Strike or competitive Tetris force the player to make instantaneous decisions. Their players are forced to act strategically without having any time to analyze those strategic options. These decisions are basically taking place below the conscious level with no conscious monitoring of them. Now, as designers, as we seek to achieve the flow state in our games for players, it's important to understand that that flow state comes in different flavors. That players can experience a game on a conscious strategic level and mull over every individual decision, or they can experience it, for lack of a better term, subconsciously, where they make those decisions without any conscious monitoring of that process. Now, games like Geometry Wars or Tetris Attack or Dance Dance Revolution are all games that fit into this example. These are games that are characterized by terms such as rhythm or instinct or deciding on a gut feeling. These are games where the strategy takes place and the player isn't even consciously aware of it. In fact, if you were to ask a player of this game, Tetris Attack or Pokemon Puzzle League, why they were doing what they were doing, the player often can't even give you an explanation of what it is that they're doing. They don't even understand. It takes them a second to step back, and truly understand why they're making the decisions that they are. These decisions are simply being made instantaneously. Same thing with Dance Dance Revolution. If you take the time to try to appreciate every single note that's coming up and think, okay, right foot here, left foot now, you'll never be able to play the game. You simply have to proceed instinctively. Now this is contrasted to games like chess, which should come up here any second. Now this is a game I have going with Andy where I have 12 days to make my next move. I have all the time in the world to mull over every possible strategic option and determine the best course of action. Now chess can certainly be experienced in the flow state, it's just substantially different. In his book, Blink, Malcolm Gladwell describes this process. It's the power of thinking without thinking, snap judgments, impulse decision making. Malcolm Gladwell goes on to explain many of the positive effects of this, although there's no examples of games within the book, but he also outlines the negatives that come with it. Obviously, by deciding things on snap judgments and impulses, we open ourselves up to racial profiling and stereotyping. Fortunately, this type of decision-making is trainable. The fact of the matter is that this type of decision-making can be trained either through experience or by consciously thinking of those strategies when not participating in them, so that when you are in that situation, you will improve your strategy. Police officers, for example, are put through intense street combat simulations so that when they get into the line of fire and are forced to make a split-second decision with lives on the line, that they will react properly. The fact of the matter is that this is a tool that we can train and we can utilize. So how do we utilize this tool as designers? Well, one way is through brainstorming, where quantity is valued over quality, where our minds are asked to make rapid connections between disparate ideas, even if we don't necessarily know how those ideas will ultimately lead to something fruitful. Another way that designers can use this subconscious processing is the idea that designers often find a problem where the more they think about it, the harder it is to solve. Ultimately, what designers have to do is take a step back and allow the subconscious to process that information while they're thinking about something else. Suddenly they have a eureka moment, the puzzle is solved, and they don't even know where it came from. But the fact of the matter is that this is a subconscious process that goes on. Another example is through procrastination. Simply, if we designers put our work off until the last minute, we're forced to act. We don't have time to think about many possible options for our projects. Instead, we simply have to make decisions and get some output. Now, obviously, there are negative connotations with procrastination, but the other side of it is the idea of rapid iterations and prototyping. The fact of the matter is that the quicker you have to make decisions, the more the brain can rely upon this subconscious processing to make valuable decisions. Now, as much as I've talked about this one form of decision-making, it's important for game designers to understand that ultimately a balance between these two forms of thinking is most successful. A balance between conscious strategic decision-making and decision-making that goes on with no conscious monitoring of it. There are many example games that allow players to switch between these modes of thinking or ultimately choose the one that's preferable to them. Poker, for example, is a game that can be played in a casino where you play 30 hands an hour and get to think over every decision for as long as you need. Or you can play it online, playing 8 tables simultaneously, playing 500 hands an hour, where you have no time to think strategically, but merely to act. But the fact of the matter is that people are able to do it well because they've trained the subconscious process through conscious thinking, mathematics, and experience. Another example is a game like StarCraft, which has an initial condition that's fairly simple and fairly repetitive. But what it does is it allows the player to take time to formulate the strategy that they're going to use throughout the game consciously, and then execute that strategy on a subconscious level when it becomes a frenzy. Another example is a game like Civilization, where a robust array of difficulty options and scenarios allows the player to basically choose for themselves what mode they'd like to play it in. They can set it up on deity and mull over every small decision as much as they want, or they can play on chieftain and just try to run everybody over. Now, in conclusion, I think it's important for us to take a lesson from Counter-Strike, where when players died, they had to wait for the entire round to end. So why didn't gamers simply pick up a game with more action? Well, what Counter-Strike did was it allowed players to take time out of the action-packed subconscious process to think about things on a conscious level and change their strategies. Now, this transition between one form of thinking to the other is something that mysticists have been trying to achieve for thousands of years through processes such as transcendental meditation, where people are taught a mantra, and the objective is to move that mantra from the conscious mind to the subconscious. And how amazing is it that we as game designers can achieve that transcendental mode through the experiences we create?